I'm gonna hand you over to him and watch him tear you limb from limb. What? I'm just kidding.
John Marston balances being a violent outlaw and a family man in a time when the old American West is becoming more civilized. Much like the Arthur Morgan video before this, the same rules apply. I'm following the storyline only and leaving the side content out of it. Animals are an important part of this world though, and will be counted as kills too. His story spans both Red Dead Redemption games and includes a lot of death, so let's count each one John is responsible for.
It's gonna be a bloody job.
I don't think I know any other kind, sir.
Let's start at the beginning, when John was born in 1873 and became an orphan at a young age. He escaped the system and lived on the streets where he tallied his first kill after shooting a man at age 11. He was picked up not long after that by Dutch Vanderland and made part of his small gang where Dutch became like a father figure to him. 9 years later, prostitute Abigail Roberts joined their group and the two produced a son named Jack. However, John left for a year due to his doubts on whether the kid was his and his own personal fears as a new father. Upon his return, most welcomed him back with open arms, but some resented him for his lack of loyalty. Eventually, as the gang grew in size, they needed more money to sustain them, which led to a job gone wrong in Blackwater that drove them into the snowy mountains. John was sent ahead to do some scouting by Dutch but didn't come back. After a couple days, he's saved by Arthur Morgan and Javier Escuela after some wolves attacked him and killed his horse. He's brought to camp to recover and makes Abigail as well as us a promise.
Guess I was hoping to see a corpse.
Bide your time. You'll see plenty of them.
They eventually relocate to a less hostile environment, and once John is up on his feet again, he accompanies Arthur Morgan on a mission to kill some O'Driscolls, the rival gang that Dutch has personal beef with, and gets his first kill we see in Red Dead 2. Afterwards, he recruits Arthur to assist in a train robbery he's planning, and nets another kill as we know he's located to the right of Arthur here when a man goes down. We see John quite a lot during the second game, but outside of the epilogue, it's through the lens of Arthur Morgan. So while he's there on a lot of these missions, he doesn't actually do a lot of killing that we can see, since most enemies are killed off by Arthur. His next kill is recorded when the Braithwaites kidnap John's son and the Vanderland gang invade their estate. John is stationed to the right of Arthur here again, and we can see a man go down. The next time we see some kills is when John eliminates 5 of Angelo Bronte's men when they vacate his mansion so that Dutch can exact some revenge. Soon after that, he gets arrested by Pinkertons in Saint Denis and spends several weeks behind bars before he's broken out by Arthur and Sadie Adler. By this point, Dutch's increasingly brash decisions threaten to get everyone killed or arrested, so Arthur warns John that he needs to take his family and get out before things get uglier. But instead, he's shot during their final robbery and left for dead by Dutch. He stumbles into the camp injured and confronts Dutch about his betrayal, but Pinkertons swarm the camp and John naps one more kill in the main game. He's saved by Arthur, who tells him to keep going and not look back, which he does in order to reunite with Jack and Abigail at Copperhorn Landing.
You're my brother. I know.
The second game ends with a 2-part epilogue that lets us spend a few hours with John as he attempts to live a normal life, but finds it difficult to conform to society in a way that satisfies Abigail. It picks up a few years later in 1907 as they pick up and leave Roanoke Ridge after John shot and killed a man. They roll into the town of Strawberry to start anew again in search for jobs. John finds one as a ranch hand for David Geddes after he delivers some goods to his ranch and successfully recovers said goods from hired guns. He spends time on the ranch learning new skills under the pseudonym Jim Milton, even though he expresses dissatisfaction with the kind of work he's doing to Abigail behind closed doors. The time there does allow him to bond with his son, however, but he's a bit of a shithead.
Keep practicing your riding.
You too. You need it.
It's not long before he gets to see some action though, because Mr. Geddes is being bullied into selling his land to Mr. Abel down the road, who keeps sending men to intimidate him into doing so. John beats some ass, much to Abigail's chagrin, but she's even less happy the next day when John volunteers to get some cattle back after they were stolen in the dead of night. This leads into the first kills witnessed in the epilogue, as John empties out Hanging Dog Ranch and strikes the cover art pose for Red Dead 1 for a stylish kill. Despite the violence, Abigail brings up some land just west of Blackwater that they can purchase, but John brushes it aside as a foolish idea since they don't have the money and putting his name on a bank loan would just lead to his arrest. He goes into town with Jack to pick some things up at the post office for the ranch and Abigail, and winds up using his real name when trying to get Abigail's package. This catches the attention of the other gentlemen in there, and on the ride back, he along with 2 others follow John. Once confronted, they reveal the man John killed in Roanoke Ridge was their leader's brother, and that grants John 3 more kills in order to protect himself and Jack. When they get back, Abigail can see Jack is visibly upset, and she matches that energy after learning about what happened, then leaves him the following day unless John can prove he can change. He receives a telegram from Sadie, who he meets in Valentine. She offers to split the bounty on a man named Nathan Kirk, and with it being legal work, John elects to tag along and help with the job so he can start accumulating funds to buy the land near Blackwater. While riding to Blackwater, John is faced by a local gang known as the Skinner Brothers, and takes 3 of them out and 1 of their horses. Then meets the banker who suggests John go check out the land before he agrees to buy it. He finds squatters that refuse to leave, and once it's clear they're ready to shoot John, he takes them out for another 3 kills. He goes back to the bank and they agree to lend him the money after Mr. Geddes put in a good word for John, and on his way out he runs into Uncle, who is surprised to see him. He accompanies John to his new plot and talks mad shit the whole way, but he's more than happy to stick around to annoy him. He very quickly wears on John's nerves as he lays around doing nothing, but the kick to his lumbago-ridden back kickstarts his memory, and they travel to Saint Denis to pick up Charles. He's throwing fights for cash, and after seeing John, decides to bet on himself, while John does the same to pick up some extra funds he desperately needs. His sudden change of mind angers some folks, with some of Bronte's ex-employees being particularly violent about their dissatisfaction, which gets them killed. Charles goes with John to his ranch, and Uncle finally convinces John to tear down that shit-ass derelict house to make room for a pre-cut house they can build themselves. But in order to keep the land, he needs money, so he meets Sadie again to assist with another bounty job, this time getting back a bounty that was stolen from her by a professional rival. They follow them through the canyon, and things get real bloody as John kills the majority of this rival bounty hunter gang to further increase his kill count. They drop the criminal off, and Sadie forwards his share to the bank, while he stops by the merchant in Blackwater to see if Uncle is capping about those pre-cut houses. Much to his surprise, John finds out the reel is the nuts swinging between his legs and adds it to his credit line at the bank. Charles brings a couple hired guns along as they pack up the supplies since he heard about the Skinner brothers scouting even closer to John's ranch. They ride out and purchase some tools from a mute in the forest and get ambushed by said Skinner brothers. John makes quick work of the initial wave, but in the chaos some make off with his tools and 1 of their hired guns, so 21 men meet their maker and bump John's kill count over 100. He retrieves his tools, but unfortunately Mr. Wayne is killed in the attack. They return to John's ranch at Beecher's Hope and start building the house as Uncle barks orders at them. Once it's finished, John takes some time to write a letter to Abigail and tell her about the changes he's made. The following day, he finds Uncle catching Z's again.
Just one time I hope to find you working.
His form of working is offering ideas though, and suggests John buy a pre-cut barn to house livestock. He needs more money though, and meets Sadie for another job. They hunt down Ramon Cortez, who is easily subdued and taken to Rhodes, but his gang is eager to free him and willing to die for it. During the gunfight, some others blew a hole in the back of the jail and successfully freed Ramon, so John and Sadie track him down and kill even more of his men in the process. They turn him in a second time and get their payday, but on his way back home, John is ambushed by some Skinners that are off for 5 more kills. Upon his return, he finds the barn fully constructed, so the 3 of them sing and celebrate deep into the night. The morning brings bad news, however, with Charles finding out Uncle was abducted by the Skinner brothers. They track them back to their camp, and John quietly kills 2 of them. They find him alive, but being slowly roasted over a weak fire. So John and Charles act quickly and kill 7 of the nasty gang to undo Uncle's bindings. While Charles helps Uncle out of there, John delivers sweet justice using his guns. They bring Uncle back to the ranch, and not too long after that, Abigail and Jack return, bringing a dog named Rufus with them. John decides to bond with his son by forcing him into his most hated activity, fishing. John nabs a bass for food later, and hurries when he hears Jack's cries for help. Rufus got his goofy ass bitten by a snake, so John uses some skills he picked up in prison to help the dog out.
Are you sucking?
While Rufus recovers, Sadie drops by to check the place out and offers John another job, which doesn't exactly delight Abigail. It's legal work, and as John says, they have hella debt to pay off, so she has to suck it up.
Are you sucking?
They find the guy hiding out in a broken down cabin, but a bear attacks and pulls some revenant shit on John before Sadie scares it off. As they bring Thurwell to the sheriff, some amateur bounty hunters block their path and threaten to steal the bounty unless they agree to split it. So John splits a skull, while Sadie gets the other. The next day is a killless one, because John takes Abigail to Blackwater on a date and gets a photo taken before they see a movie, and he proposes on the lake to make their marriage official. The final mission in the game begins when Sadie arrives with news of Micah. Abigail is forced to accept that John is going out there to get revenge on the rat that helped tear their previous life apart. And that begins in Strawberry when his old pal Cleet tells him he's holed up in the mountains. John lets him hang, but a sniper watches the path up there and shoots Charles in his shoulder. John rushes up the mountain avoiding fire until he's close enough to kill the guy. Charles urges them to go ahead, and that's exactly what they do as John takes down 14 of Micah's bitches before Sadie gets stabbed and has to hang back as well. The final stretch throws 33 more men at John, who all fall to the superior gunslinger's quickness. Micah finally shows his rat face, but he's able to pin John down until Sadie comes around to his side and gets him to come out. But one final surprise surfaces as Dutch emerges from the cabin with guns pointed in both directions. That distraction is enough for Micah to turn it around on Sadie as a standoff begins with John pleading for Dutch to do the right thing. He does right by them by shooting Micah and leaving him there for John to finish off by planting 8 bullets in his face. Dutch departs without a word, and they find a whole lot of cash and gold inside the cabin. They return to Beecher's Hope and celebrate their return as the credits roll. There's several scenes showing us how various characters are doing, but the ones important to John show his official marriage to Abigail and the subsequent celebration, both Charles and Sadie saying their goodbyes as they set off elsewhere, and finally some agents from the Bureau of Investigation tracking leads that eventually lead them to John at his ranch. The first game picks up 4 years later in 1911, with John being escorted to the train station in Blackwater by Agent Ross and Agent Fordham. John is being forced to go after Bill Williamson, who is now the leader of the largest gang left in the West. John gets off at the train in the town of Armadillo, and is escorted to Fort Mercer by a local and promptly shot after confronting Bill. They leave him for dead, but then a passerby picks him up and takes him to a doctor. He wakes up and meets Bonnie McFarlane, who was kind enough to pay $15 for John's doctor visit, so to help pay her back, he assists with some errands around her ranch, including killing some pests on her farm. The following 2 quests consist of John whooping that slow horse-riding ass in a race, and accompanying Bonnie to Armadillo while she buys some supplies. She suggests he introduce himself to the town marshal, who may be able to assist with Bill. He basically tells John no fucking way because his plate is entirely too full, so John offers to take on some of that work to ease his burden. They follow a bandit back to his little gang, and John increases hell's population by 5, while nabbing their leader for the marshal. They get back to town when Deputy Eli's goofy ass saunters in, saying he spotted some scoundrels rounding up livestock that ain't theirs. So John and the law head out there and gun down the Ballard gang to earn another 21 kills. Eli mentions a merchant named Wes Dickens hasn't been heard of, and despite the marshal downplaying it, John seeks him out and finds him in the desert severely injured. He's a tonic merchant that scams people for cash, so his current state is arguably deserved, but John defends him from 4 incoming miscreants in order to drop him off at the doctor's. The next 5 missions don't have any kills, unless you count me purposefully letting these stupid ass fucking cows run off the cliff. John helps around the McFarlane ranch some more and meets Bonnie's father Drew. He helps Dickens peddle his worthless merchandise to the uneducated by making it seem like his incredible firearm skills were due to his tonics. Dickens suggests John go find a man named Seth who can help against Bill. He unexpectedly finds the American Schmeagle robbing some graves while ranting about a stolen treasure map. Seth really doesn't want John there though, until he offers to help him recover the map. He chases down his previous partner, who pisses himself after looking at this cretin's facial hair and telling him where the map is. Not wanting to deal with Seth again for a bit, John heads back to Armadillo and assists Marshal Lee with hunting down bandits that are murdering settlers for no good reason. They soon find out that Bill's gang is committing the violence, and they give them exactly what they deserve. After saving the McFarlane ranch from a fire, John meets Dickens again and wins a race to bolster his funds. He then tells John to seek a man that goes by Irish who can help procure a Gatling gun they can use to assault Fort Mercer. So he does exactly that, and kills the Frenchie and Welshie trying to drown him. He leads John out to a secluded shack occupied by 7 bandits that get bum rushed and killed by Mr. Marston. But he quickly realizes the goods are not there. So he locates the little fuckface and reminds the punk he's helping in his fight against Bill and better get him that gun. This time he leads him to a mine and says there's one deep in the shaft. John wastes little time and invades the job site while taking out 30 men in the process of obtaining the Gatling gun. But the major problem is it didn't come with any ammo. He puts that on the back burner for now after hearing that Bonnie has been kidnapped by Bill's gang in order to get his second-in-command back. John promises Drew to get his daughter, and they ride out to the town of Tumbleweed to do the exchange. But they aren't there for talk and open fire as soon as John approaches. They fail miserably, and John saves Bonnie from too much harm. Afterwards, he finds himself in the company of East Vagins again as a participant in one of his scams. But some fellas from the previous location roll in to inform these fine folk that Mr. Dickens is a fraud. They rush back to his coach, and John fends off 30 of these motherfuckers as they keep on coming after them. John spends the next couple days gathering supplies to take on Bill and helping bring Seth's treasure hunting quest to an end after he finds out it didn't exist. In doing so, he's forced to kill 30 like-minded treasure hunters that essentially died for nothing. He then finds Irish sticking up some nuns and shames him into getting some goddamn ammo for that Gatling gun, which brings another 30 kills John's way when he fights against a gang of bandits to obtain it. Finally, one first place finish later, and they've earned enough cash and supplies to assault Bill and his gang at the fort. Dickens concocts a plan that is much more useful than his tonics, and will utilize a Trojan horse method to sneak John into the fort and unleash hell on the Williamson gang. In just over a minute, John downs 23 men using the Gatling gun, then mops up 7 more while the law helps out. But just as the Gatling gun is cooled down, even more of Bill's men send themselves into the meat grinder for John to bump his numbers up even more. They find one lone survivor and question him about Bill's whereabouts, and discover he fled down to Mexico. John quickly realizes it's to partner up with Javier Escuela, so that makes south of the border his next destination. Irish claims he has many friends down there and offers to take him, but as they cross the river, a shit ton of bandits are there waiting for them and help John's count over 500. He rides to the town of Chuparosa, and 3 locals decide to give John grief and escalate into demanding his boots, but those are worth way more than their lives to John. A legendary name watches from the sidelines, and John soon meets Landon Ricketts, an old-timer now, but before John's time used to be the fastest gunslinger in the West. He teaches John a few things, which leads to 4 vultures being shot out of the sky. Landon is flagged by a local to help with some bandits, so he takes John out to utilize his fresh teachings and downs 5 bandits during practice. The Mexico chapter is an incredibly fun time that has John get mixed up in a revolution as he works both sides of the fence with the army and the rebels. But he starts with the army first, who promise to help find Javier and Bill in exchange for his help. He eliminates several rebels, but in doing so finds out quickly that Captain DeSanta and Colonel Allende are lying, power-hungry fools that kidnap women and kill peasants in the name of order. John links up with Landon again, who is doing his own digging, but not finding anything about Javier. However, a rebel woman named Luisa has been kidnapped and her brother is requesting Landon's help. They ride out to the mines and craft plenty of kills as they save Luisa and get her back to her family. Without much of a lead, John goes back to DeSanta and is forced into yet another mission with promises they'll help him afterwards. They got word the rebels are setting up in a fort nearby, so they don't want them to establish a stronghold, and John gets a huge bump in kills as 52 rebels go in the ground. John returns to Chuparosa to rest and play some poker with Landon, but this dipshit German fellow gets real aggro after John folds and claims he looked at his cards. This leads to a duel, and the only thing Mr. Mueller wins is several bullets to the face. His little posse soon follows, and John leaves town to find Luisa urging her family to get out before the Mexican army shows up. With him there, she requests his help in escorting her sister to the river, and 11 Mexican soldiers meet their end as they attempt to stop their wagon. Right after killing some of his men, John joins up with DeSanta again and judges him for their treatment of the populace, but he continues to dangle Javier and Bill in front of him if he completes another job. This one results in a stupid amount of kills though, as John escorts an army train across the entire territory and defends it from rebel attack. John takes a breather with Landon Ricketts again, and they exchange outlaw stories.
I got shot in a robbery.
Luisa barges in to ruin their good time and asks they go free some innocent people from execution, which turns into another 16 kills for Marston. They get them across the border into America, and from there, Landon guides them further into the country and wishes John luck on his journey. When he gets back to Luisa, she weeps for her country as rebel leader Abraham Reyes has been captured by the army and awaits execution. So of course she asks John to free the man and save their country. He sneaks in and snipes the 9 men inside, then unties the man to find out Abraham doesn't even really remember who Luisa is.
You know my young lover, Laura.
It's Luisa.
Regardless, he gets him out of there, gunning down 6 more men before offloading him onto the clueless Luisa. While John continues to play both sides, that will soon come to an end as he meets DeSanta and Allende, who claim to have Bill and Javier waiting for him in Chuparosa. bash him in the back of the head and tie him up, but right before his death, the rebels save him and John gets his opportunity to get some revenge and kill one of their captains. Now that he doesn't have to work for the army needlessly, he now starts doing tasks for Reyes, who makes similar promises to John about Javier and Bill. He does 3 missions for Reyes that result in decent amount of kills as he gathers supplies, eliminates reinforcements, and helps with taking down bitch-ass DeSanta. He beats DeSanta's face in, which leads to him confessing Javier's location. So he leads the corrupt captain to the rebels to kill, only to find out Javier hasn't been at Casa Madrigada for months. John visits Reyes at the worst possible time, or best, depending on if he likes to watch or not. But as he goes limp, he explains that Javier is hiding amongst the army at the Fort El Presidio, and the rebels are ready to attack it. They raid the fort, and John takes down 16 soldiers before finding Javier. He lures John into conversation and causes a distraction, but he doesn't get far before John kills his horse and ties him up. He tosses his ass in jail within the fort as the army mounts a counterattack that quickly gets thwarted when John blasts them and their horses to bits using a cannon. After things calm down, Javier is given to Agents Ross and Fordham, and they reiterate he still needs to find Bill. With momentum on their side, the rebels come for Allende and his remaining troops, but Luisa has never been given proper training and told not to scream to give your opponents more than enough time to react and kill you. This leads to another large bump in kills as John helps with the revolution and chases after Bill and Allende alongside Reyes. Instead of handing him to the government, John just shoots Bill in his insignificant brain, while Reyes simultaneously eliminates Allende to become the leader of the people. He thanks John for his service, and he says he should be thanking his people, including people like Luisa, who put their lives on the line.
Bullshit.
With his business done there, John meets the agents in Blackwater and demands to see his family, but they inform him he's not finished yet and has one final man to hunt down, Dutch Vanderlyn. He's running another gang mostly filled with natives and are supposedly hiding out on a partially sunken riverboat just outside of town. They find it empty outside of their informant, who has been beaten and tied up, so John carries him out of there while simultaneously murdering 21 of Dutch's new gang. They drop Nastas off with Professor McDougal, who is in town to perform research on the difference between the colonizers and the natives. John talks to him and it's clear he's an idiotic, drug-addled racist, but him and Nastas do their best to ignore the guy as they ride out to scout Dutch's supposed location. Nastas gets hurt and can't proceed after a crazed miner attacks him, so John guns down more miners and is forced to fight off a bear and a cougar on his way up the mountain. He sneak attacks a scout of Dutch's and uses his binoculars to confirm they set themselves up in a nice little fortress. Dutch uses his dead eye to shoot the binoculars, which KOs John, but Nastas is able to carry him down the mountain and back to town. When John goes to meet Ross, he's immediately given a gun and told to go to the roof, while Dutch and his gang supposedly head into the bank across the way. John is able to take on 17 of Dutch's outlaws before he encounters the man face to face for the first time in nearly 5 years. They catch up as guns remain drawn, and Dutch proves he's just a killer by doming this poor woman and making a run for it. They chase after him and tack on even more kills to show the Bureau that he's committed to killing Dutch. John rides into Blackwater and meets McDougal for a couple missions that thankfully leads to his departure from the west as he's targeted by Dutch's gang and scared off. Across the 2 missions, it leads to 32 more men dying and 1 bear that McDougal scares into attacking us. It also leads to the unfortunate death of Nastas, whose final moments were in the presence of this buffoon. To close out the chapter, John, Agents Ross and Fordham, and the US Army join forces to take on Dutch and his gang. This gives John nearly 100 more kills as he turns man and horse alike into meaty Swiss cheese using the army provided Gatling gun and his own firearms. He chases Dutch up the mountain and corners him on a cliff, and it's there Dutch offers his last bit of wisdom with some foreshadowing by telling John they will always look for another monster even when he's dead. Then goes out his own way with some parting words both he and Arthur Morgan are sure as shit sick of hearing.
I got a plan, John.
Ross then tells John his family is back at home at his Podunk Ranch in Beecher's Hope and says he'll see him around. Before going back home, there's one stranger quest I felt was important enough to include. He meets up with a nameless man that claims to know John and proves that to be true by going into deep detail about his past, including the job gone wrong in Blackwater from years ago. He asks John to perform 2 very simple tasks, but each provides a moral test. The first one is to either encourage or dissuade this man from cheating on his wife, whereas the second has John meet Sister Calderon years after Arthur saw her off. He can choose to rob her or donate $10 to the poor. He eventually finds him near his home, and he repeatedly tells John that they're standing on a fine spot before he leaves, and John attempts to give him a parting gift that is all for naught. Once he's back home, he's greeted with aggression by Abigail, and news that their livestock have all all been killed or stolen because Uncle probably slept the whole fucking time. The following morning, John takes his son out to the McFarland ranch and purchases some cattle so he can herd them all the way back home. Yeah! Some rustlers attempt to steal them, but John shows them what's what and leads the annoying goddamn animals back to the ranch. This last chapter is pretty slow, as John and his family get accustomed to working the ranch again, which leads to several animal kills as John has to save their corn stock, and teach Jack how to hunt to earn food, money, and protect their herd. During the final stupid fucking herding mission, John and Uncle take their herd out to the pasture, and in the process witness some bandits robbing a train, and while I tried to ignore it, they started firing upon me, so I fired upon them. Afterwards, John breaks some wild horses, and takes Abigail down to meet Bonnie McFarland to deliver some corn. As they leave, Bonnie gets one final look at John's yams, and they head home to find out Jack decided to go bear hunting on his own like a silly little bitch. John turns the bear's head into hamburger, and takes his son back home with a stern warning to stop being a dumbass. He compliments his tool working, however, and glosses over what the next few years will look like on the farm, but that time will never come for them when Uncle urgently demands their attention. The US Army sends dozens of men his way, and what Dutch said rings true.
When I'm gone, they'll just find another monster.
He is unable to save Uncle, but he successfully gets Jack and Abigail out of there before they're hurt. John kills 37 soldiers and 2 horses while defending his home, but they have far too many men to contend with, so John just meets them face to face. He draws and successfully kills just one of them before he's shot to hell by the Bureau and the Army being led by that bastard Ross. After hearing the gunfire ring out, Jack turns their horse around and they find John Marston dead on the ground. They bury him soon after, right in that spot the stranger kept talking about. 3 years later, Abigail joins his side, and Jack Marston turns up on Ross's doorstep to get his revenge. Perhaps John would be proud of him for that, but perhaps he would want better for his son instead of leading the same kind of life John himself tried to leave behind. I do know for sure he'd be proud of every single one of my subscribers, so if you haven't already, join the party so you can see more videos like this on your feed. Consider hitting that like button as well to supercharge the algorithm. John led an eventful life, and despite doing his best to change his ways, he always seemed to fall back into his old lifestyle, whether on his own fruition or being forced to by circumstance. I'll be wrapping up this series with Undead Nightmare next, but let me know what characters you'd like to see covered. Thanks as always for watching. I'm King Deschain, signing off for now.